Okay, we'll call the Thursday, May 10th, 2019 Water Commission meeting to order. I'll just blow through the roll call and note that Ms. Burney and Mr. Davis are absent. Everybody else is present. And the agenda is still good to go.
No changes to the agenda.
Okay. And then I'll open public comment for items that are not on the agenda. And I don't see anybody standing up, so we'll move through that item. And on to the two consent items. Let's take these separately because I think there's a little discussion on item B. So looking at the minutes from March 28th, any comments or changes? To entertain a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And that passes. And then on the Kachuma Conservation Release Board fiscal year budget ratification, that's a recommendation to move forward. And I know you and I think, both received some input from Commissioner Davis. Would you want to just briefly go over that for everybody's benefit?
Sure. There was a request from Commissioner Davis to provide a presentation in an upcoming Water Commission meeting on the components of the revised state water rights draft order, and then and go through our comments on that order, which will be public by the time we bring it back to Water Commission. So I'm going to be reaching out to Peter Cantle, the Executive Director of the Kachuma Conservation Release Board, to invite him to the Water Commission meeting to give the presentation. So I'll work with him on his schedule and get that on the agenda soon.
Okay, that'd be great. And then otherwise, this is just a procedural process for each of the members to move forward, right? So does anybody have any questions or comments on this item? Okay, then I'd entertain a motion to recommend to council.
Motion to recommend.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously also. So let's move on to our first item, water agencies update.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Water Commissioners, Councilmember Snedden, my name is Kelly Dyer. I'm the Water Supply Manager, and I'm briefly going to be giving an update on the 3 joint powers agencies that we're a member of. So the first will be Kachuma Operation and Maintenance Board. They had their last board meeting on April 22nd. The next board meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 27th. At their last meeting, the board voted to continue the contract with Cushman Contracting Corporation for storage of the emergency pump facility. As you know, with the rain that we received this spring, we didn't need to install the barge, but it is we are holding the major components in storage, and COMB staff was able to negotiate a very, very reasonable price for storing that facility, and it's really just the backup plan in case, we don't know if we're going to get another dry year next year, and it keeps our options open and remains flexible depending on whether we need it in the coming years. Updates were also provided regarding the Hilton Creek watering system, which is also a barge system. Once the lake level drops below a certain point, water has to be pumped over to Hilton Creek as part of the biological opinion for steelhead trout. That pump system is not operational. It's owned and operated and maintained by the Bureau of Reclamation, but it requires some repair. It's not currently working. In the meantime, are using a backup system, which is providing flows to Hilton Creek, although it requires use of the penstock at Bradbury Dam, which is where our state water normally comes in. Because of that, we've had interruptions in our state water supply. So we're not currently receiving state water, and Reclamation continues to work on a fix for that barge system in the meantime. And I'll talk about what CCWA is doing on their end when I give the CCWA update to try and resolve the issue.
What's the timing on when they will have it fixed? Because it's been a while, no?
We haven't received anything in writing on when they might fix it. I would guess it's going to take them 6 months to a year potentially, because it's the federal government has a certain process they follow, and it takes a little bit longer. They're not as able to respond to things like that. The local agencies have a much faster process in responding. COM's also continuing to work on the water quality and sediment management plan, and they are updating their infrastructure improvement plan. So that's it for COM. Unless there's any questions, I'll move on to the Kachuma Conservation and Release Board. There's a lot of work going on at CCRB right now. A revised draft water rights order was released by the State Water Resources Control Board on March 27th. This is the water rights order that we'll be giving a presentation on in the coming months. Currently, CCRB, Reclamation, and the downstream interests are working on their respective comments on the order and had requested an extension for the public comment period, which the state granted. That was successful. So comments are now due on May 29th. We also requested that the state board postpone its hearing on adoption of the revised order. They had originally scheduled that for June 4th. They've agreed to postpone that hearing as well. They have not set a new date. CCRB is also working on there's a federal reconsultation process going on between NIMFS and the Bureau of Reclamation. National Marine Fisheries Service and the Bureau of Reclamation are two federal agencies that are consulting on a revised biological opinion for steelhead trout. The original biological opinion was done in 2000, and then in 2014 they decided to, NIMFS requested that a reconsultation process be restarted. So currently Reclamation is working to prepare a biological assessment of a new proposed action for the Kachuma project, and we'll be delivering that to NIMFS. Reclamation requested assistance from CCRB and the downstream interests in drafting some technical plans to support the biological assessment, and so that is what CCRB has been doing recently, and Reclamation provided a review of those draft plans, and now CCRB and the downstream interests are working on addressing Reclamation's comments. So I think those are the major, a lot of work underway. Of course, the state board order comments, we have a very short time frame to respond to that, so a lot of work. Central Coast Water Authority. The last board meeting was on April 25th, and the next board meeting is May 24th. I expect there will be a lot of updates on what's happening at the state level at that meeting. You may have seen or heard that Governor Newsom announced a major new water initiative, and it included a strategy to modernize the state water project infrastructure, but to go to design a single tunnel system rather than the twin tunnel or dual conveyance system. And so on May 2nd, the State Department of Water Resources released a memo withdrawing approvals of the Cal Water Fix project, and they rescinded all the environmental documentation that was done to support that two-tunnel project. So they're basically resetting the process. So that's the status of that. When we were at Aqua last week, the director of Department of Water Resources, Carla Nemeth, gave a presentation, and I had asked the status of the water management contract amendments, because that was kind of done as part of the Cal Water Fix project, and it has a lot of benefits to us if they move forward with those water management amendments. And she indicated there's a possibility they could continue on with those independently. So we'll be looking to see the state water contractors pursue that. Let's see. State water project allocation, 70%. They don't think that's going up. So that's pretty much the final allocation at this point. And as I mentioned earlier, the CCWA state water deliveries are currently interrupted. When the penstock is being used for deliveries to Hilton Creek, there's an issue because the 2000 biological opinion for Steelhead doesn't allow mixing of state water with water that's used for fish releases. There's certain blending requirements and temperature requirements. So that's why we can't deliver state water to that point right now. During the drought, CCWA had installed a temporary bypass around the penstock that kind of went up and over the dam and brought the water in at a different delivery point to Lake Cachuma. However, when we received the wonderful rainfall this year, the lake level rose and they had to remove that bypass piping. So CCWA is working on a modified design. They're working with the Bureau of Reclamation Denver office to try and reinstall the bypass piping, but it won't go as far into the lake. It's going to be a shorter bypass pipe, but they are working. We don't have a schedule for that either. It's currently, I think, in Reclamation's hands to approve the design. And as soon as we get approval for that, I think it will be a very short time frame to get that installed by CCWA. One thing to be aware of, we had, most of the South Coast agencies were not relying on state water this summer. We have other sources we can use at Cachuma. But La Cumbra Mutual Water Company had been relying on state water. And so when they were cut off, they were facing water shortages this summer. So it was kind of an urgent water supply situation for them. And they approached the city of Santa Barbara about some water supply assistance. And so we were able to help them by foregoing our portion of the exchange with ID1, which is the only way to get state water to Cachuma right now is by sending state water to ID1, which is in Santa Ynez, and in exchange they give their Cachuma allotments at Cachuma. So you don't need to pump it all the way up to Cachuma. It's more of a paper exchange method for getting state water to the lake. So that's how La Cumbra will be receiving state water this summer. And I think we've resolved the water shortage situation that they were facing. And that's, if there's any questions, that was all I had for this morning.
Questions?
Councilmember Sned, do you have anything to add to all those?
Everything's so simple already, right?
I just love Ms. Dyer when you summarize everything because I'm there at each of these meetings and voting, and we're in the moment of it, and then you give this really concise, nice summary. I'm like, that's right, that is what we've been working on and doing. I was wondering if it's at what point we'll talk about, or if we will, our comments to the implications for desal and water with the new state considerations of our allocations or water usage. If that's something, is that agendized to talk, or in this report maybe it could be?
Councilmember Stettin, I think we can probably bring that once the comments are public. I think we can bring that as part of the discussion with when CCRB comes to talk about the state water rights order. So the revised draft order has a lot of additions in it related to the city's desal plant and how that affects water supply impacts for the Cachuma member units. The order basically uses the city's desal plant to offset shortages for all of the Cachuma member units, which, we have a concern because the city owns and operates the plant and it's our right to that water. We can choose to enter into water sales agreements with other member units, but the state kind of made an assumption that it was available for everyone's use. So we're considering writing our own letter from the city to address that issue specifically. And we can bring that back, I think, in June or July when we have a more comprehensive discussion on all of the state water rights order components and our comments on them as well.
Thank you. I just thought it would be good to be aware that that's something we might be thinking about. Thank you so much.
Okay. Nothing further on that? Okay. Thanks, Ms. Dyer.
Okay.
On to the next item, continuation of wastewater high-strength surcharge fee discussion. I think this item has me to blame for it, whenever that was, a month or so ago, and we were short people sitting up here that month, and I thought it should come back for full discussion when everybody was here, and that, of course, when you make those kind of plans, that doesn't quite work out that everybody's here then when it comes back. So, but I think it's still worth discussing, and we have some new information or better information, and so take it away.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Councilmember Sneddon, Malcolm Hamilton, Administrative Analyst in the Water Resources Division. That's right, we were here with the Commission on March 28th for a special meeting where we initially went through each of the proposed rates in the wastewater rate study. This is a continued discussion at the request of the Commission. So for my presentation, I have two main categories that I'd like to go over, one of which was looking again at the rate study and just reviewing what the cost of service analysis does, particularly in these treatment costs and the strength factors. And then we'll move on to looking at the high strength surcharges, who they impact, what kind of outreach we're planning to do and what we've done in the interim, and then looking at what kind of rate impacts with some of the new information we've been provided and gathered on our own. So going back to the cost of service analysis, there's really kind of four components here, and the first being functionalizing cost, which is taking your cost and putting them into your major categories, whether it's treatment, collection, all or general cost, billing costs such as that. The second component is allocating these costs to different components, so it's volume, BOD or TSS, or our strength factors, ammonia, capacity demand, and several others that we've been over. Once you've gone to the components, you allocate the components to your different classes, then you understand how much revenue you need to recover from each class, and finally you design rates, and for us we take those components for each class, we group them into fixed and volumetric charges, you divide by your relative units, and that's how you develop your rates. I think one thing I want to point out here and what this leads into is that the high strength surcharges are also an outcome of this cost of service analysis. So there's nothing in addition to or special that we do for those. They are also a core component of the rate study. So looking more particularly at our strength factors and how we get to those, the thing we have to do is gather information, and as you can imagine, there's really kind of two ways to do this. If you have good and complete sampling data, which we do for most of our industrial customers, that's what we chose to use in the rate study. So we had the data available, actual sampling data of their strength levels, and we chose to use that. It's unlikely, and in our case, we don't have individual sampling of our residential or multifamily customers, and it's very rare that any agencies really do. And even then, they may have small samples which aren't applicable across their whole customer base. So in our instance, the HDR rate consultant chose to use industry standards that they know from other rate studies, as well as some general guidelines, particularly from the EPA as well. And then once we have those different strength levels for each of the strength components, we determine reasonable limits. So these are the limits at which we believe we're capturing most all of the activity within different classes, residential, commercial high, and industrial. At that point, they determined there was a maximum limit, which beyond that would be outside of kind of the normal or standard range for our customers. And further there, we went to calculate a per pound unit cost. So looking at the high strength surcharges, we recover these costs. They're associated with treating all pounds of waste beyond these reasonable limits that we determined. Here I've listed the different limits for which you would be charged. And like I mentioned, these treatment costs are derived from the cost of service analysis, so there's nothing in addition to special or different than how these costs are determined on that proportional and equitable basis that all the others are determined. I did want to note here that with any model, you want to go back at the end and do some quality control, and with ours, of course, you can always reconcile your strength assumptions, which lead to pounds, to your actual plant data, which we did, and they are consistent on the whole. And that was done for each of the strength factors, and including our volume as well. So turning to what we've identified as our customers, we knew from the outset that septic and portable restroom haulers would be applicable. They typically have very high strength levels. At this time, Marburg Industries is the only septic portable restroom service that would be subject to these high strength surcharges. Of course, there's others that operate in town. We believe that maybe some of them discharge at the Marburg facilities. And of course, there's others that operate and take their waste to down south or up north to Santa Maria. We also, as kind of a burgeoning industry in many places, is alcohol beverage manufacturers. This would be breweries, wineries, distilleries that have the possibility of really putting some high-strength batch dumps into the system at a single time. I'll talk a little bit more about what we've learned about their possibility and frequency, but they certainly are an identified high-strength surcharge customer potentially. And industrial laundry operations as well. Currently, we don't have any of these. The industrial laundry operations that we do have are in our pre-treatment program. They are pre-treating and reducing their strength levels to below our high strength factors, but it's possible we'd have a new operator and they'd be subject to these as well. And also I should mention it's not exclusive to these classes, so we really believe our high strength customers would be in the commercial classes, but they're applicable to any customer class. Although I can't really theoretically think of a residential customer that's doing something at this time, it's possible.
Interrupt you for a question? We have the luxury, right? Remind me if I'm wrong, but we have the luxury on the septic and the porta potties that's a dedicated discharge mechanism from Marburg, right? They have their own pipe that...
Mr. Chair, that's correct. They discharge into the sewer system as opposed to at the plant.
You're now acknowledging that these breweries, wineries, and distilleries would fall in that classification too. Their only method right now would be just to put it into the normal collection system that also includes residential, right?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. They would be discharging into the sewer system as well.
So how would you capture that data or determine if they were falling within the HSS or not?
Well, that's part of our permits and outreach. So we do have our local limits person that monitors these entities, and so they do have a relationship when they come into town and they set up a business and they do have the potential of that. We sit down and go through it, and we're trying to make this a positive experience with them. Again, under normal circumstances, these shouldn't apply, but if they have a batch that goes bad, trying to get them into the mindset of, hey, just give us a call. We want to work with you on this. Again, the costs for discharging a batch, and we'll talk about this later, would be pretty small.
Okay.
But wanting to have that relationship, because that could have an upset at the plant, depending on when they let it go. If we have low flows and they let something really high strength, it could really set off our process and cause a problem, because we are, at the end, managing a biological process.
Okay, thanks.
So getting into the pretreatment customer outreach that we're doing, of course, we have some customers that are already in our pretreatment program. We'll be reaching out to them individually. We have a relationship already, so we'll do a education description of the new potential charges, and those will be based on their quarterly samples that are already taking place. Mr. Chair, I believe this is what you're getting at. The next point is we have non-pretreatment customers like these breweries that potentially will have high-strength surcharges, and so what we're doing right now is like Mr. Hagmark said, trying to have a positive relationship, developing that relationship, working with them to educate them on the importance of letting us know when you're going to have one of these batch discharges, and also going through the process of how we would potentially charge them. So we're in the early stages, but certainly developing the relationship with our non-pretreatment customers is important. And then specifically looking at one of the larger impacts is to Marburg Industries and our outreach that we've done with them. The rate study estimates that their annual increase in wastewater fees will be about $300,000. Early estimates provided in December 2017 and June 2018 put a range on these cost impacts at about $250,000 to $300,000. Early on, our messaging was that we had anticipated and were working on changes to our secondary treatment process, and because of those changes, there would very likely be increased costs for treatment. The outcome of which was rolled into our rate study, so I believe early on the discussion was having them pay kind of a fee outside potentially of the rate study. In this case, with the rate study going on, we rolled that into the rate study as well, and that was the outcome that's come out of that. Our recent meetings, March 2019, we were able to preview the strength allocations with Marburg and hopefully give them some ability to estimate their impacts and their loadings. And then in May 2019, just recently, we were able to review the rate study with them. We went through questions they may have had. We did a discussion of the impacts on that, and we broadly talked about how there are potentially ways to phase the rate in or have the same amount of payment but over a different timetable, and we're working with our finance department to look at some of these options.
Just a quick question. So how much does that represent in terms of percent increase per year? The 300,000 is how much roughly?
Roughly right now, the septic rate they're paying is about 0.6%, and it would go up to about 5 cents a gallon. So it's, I think, approximately a 750% increase.
Right now, they pay about $30,000 a year for septic and porta potty treatment.
So looking at the customer impacts and what we've done the research here is we've reached out to a couple breweries, a couple other outside consultants about what they see in this industry. The vat, or the little holding tank I showed, are typically somewhere in the range of 700 to 1,400 gallons. What we understand is this is very infrequent. It is by no means a regular operation of a brewery or a winery to be dumping product, of course, nor is it normal to have experimental batches that you intend to dump at the outset. So what we understand is it's infrequent. They do have very high strength. When you look at their BOD loadings, it can be upwards of 100,000 milligrams per liter, and their TSS of about 50,000 milligrams per liter. Our residential customers, for reference on BOD, is about 250 milligrams per liter. So it's substantially more, but very minimal amounts of volume being dumped, and so we estimate that the impacts will be minimal at this time.
The operation you're talking about was the normal course of their business might have some higher strengths, but what you're actually worried about is they brew a whole hundreds of thousands of gallons, something goes wrong, and they want to dump that all at one time.
Mr. Chair, that's exactly it.
Is there a critical number of breweries, that we could have where the risk of multiple breweries having a bad batch that they're releasing at the same time would cause?
We don't think we're at that point where we have a critical mass on that, but that's something that's exactly why we have those relationships with them, and I think we're keeping an eye on our pretreatment coordinator makes it around there quite often just to check in with them, again, wanting to be a positive force at this point, not wanting to over-regulate something, and I think we're just keeping an eye on it, but at this point I don't think it's a critical mass, but we certainly want to make sure that it doesn't cause a problem in which we have to react with some type of regulations on that.
I wouldn't think it's at a critical mass now, but I'm just wondering that we hear so much about economic development and breweries are the way of the future, and they seem to be, there are a lot of permit applications for breweries, and so I'm just wondering, is there, is it 20? Is it 30? If we had 30 breweries, What would
I
be the-
think that would give us we would be looking critically at it with 30 breweries. And I think what we do see a lot, I mean, for example, Topa Topa is in town, but they don't have a brewery. It's more of a tasting room. So we do see a lot of tasting rooms showing up, but they don't necessarily, I think Figueroa is another one where they do most of their brewing up north and bring there. So, but certainly if that trend to actually having the brewing capabilities, I think one of the things that kind of limits us is we just don't have a lot of industrial space, and the cost of property here is so high that I think there will always be pressure to brew in Ventura, Oxnard, Goleta, and then have your tasting room here.
Okay, thank you.
And now we'll move into specifically some of the impacts we see, potential impacts for Marburg Industries. This was data provided to us from Marburg just recently. If you're looking at portable restroom service, a monthly rental, you're getting about 2 services a day, 48 services. And over the course of a month, they're collecting 480 gallons of waste. This is our cost. This is the labor line portable restroom right here. It's city maintained or paid for. And the current cost is $691 for the month for that service. Current treatment cost, based on the current rate, is about $2.88. And that would increase with our proposed rates to $24.
I think this is kind of, I would say this is probably one of the more heavily used porta potties. Typically, you might associate it with someone doing construction on their house and has it there for a contractor. I would guess the frequency in which those are pumped and how much waste is there is probably significantly less. But, this was, we appreciate Marburg providing these numbers to help us try and put this all in perspective.
And again, looking at a standard septic service, Marburg provided this data to us. If you have a 5,000-gallon septic tank and regularly or often you pump it every 7 years, the current customer cost for that service to pump the 5,000 gallons would be $2,400. Current treatment cost on that would be $30, and that would raise to $250 under our proposed rates.
Roughly, that works out to about $2.50 a month for treatment of the septic waste at the end of the period.
So the current treatment cost, that's what Marburg is actually paying to the city? Okay.
And that concludes my presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions, comments? What exactly are we looking for out of this? Just a blessing, right?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, that's a good one. So we are already set up for a hearing June
11th, we'll have a public hearing.
on this item, and I think, as I recall, you wanted just to bring us back for further discussion, and I think we've gotten a more details about what those impacts would be to the potential customers who utilize porta potty and septic service, and anyway.
Okay, so I'll start off with a question or two. So once you know this, I mean, it's accurate to say you didn't really study this in past rate studies, right? This high-strength issue.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. This is a new rate for
Okay,
us.
and so once you know this and you have the data, does Prop 18 or other legal requirements require that you break this out and treat it separately in terms of rate and for class of customer?
Mr. Chair, I don't think Proposition 218 is that prescriptive in how you treat your strength factors,
Okay.
but the goal being equitable and proportional.
Right. So more of
share.
a policy standpoint.
Right. This is the recommendation of HDR when they looked at our data and the strengths we were seeing. I think Ms.
Yeah,
Daniel
we definitely
Hensky, our
definitely
city
have
attorney.
a rule that attorneys cannot stand up in the middle of a hearing.
Honorable Chair, members of the commission, I think we want to be a little bit more precise about the answer to that question. The issue is under either Prop 218, which would apply to much of the sewer rates. You can't have one class of customer subsidizing the treatment costs associated with another class of customer. So if we determine that as a result of the study that the customer class that has the high strength discharge has a higher treatment cost, then the costs associated with that higher level of treatment or the higher treatment requirements or the impact on the system, however that turns out, need to be allocated in a reasonable and proportional way to the customers causing that impact.
Okay.
And so cost causation is kind of the basis for the allocation. What we're learning is that there's a cost allocation issue that needs to be addressed. Is it a policy call? To a certain extent, yes, but the policy call must be informed and guided by the allocation principles of the Constitution. So you can't just say, yeah, gee, it would be really nice to just kind of keep it the way it is because, it's going to be a big impact. We can't do, if it shows that in fact there are cost allocations that other customers ought not be bearing, we need to figure out a way to make that transition.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. Any questions? I have a couple public comments then, so we can come back for questions after that if you want. Mr. Carlson, you're up first. If you'd make sure that little green light is on at the base of the microphone.
Yes, good morning. I'm Derek Carlson, business manager for Marburg Industries, and I appreciate the commission coming back to this item the last time. We did not have the consultant's report available to discuss, and since then we have been able to see the consultant's report and also have an opportunity to meet with city staff regarding the consultant's report. As we testified previously, we still have a concern with the percent increase that our disposal fees are going up as a result of this rate study. And as this item has moved forward and we've been able to see the consultant's report and digest it and understand the background as far as why it why it was undertaken and the results. We are, and we've moved on to the Finance Committee. We see the reason for the increase in the study, and what we have proposed to the Finance Committee as this has moved forward to them is that we take a look at being able to phase in this rate increase over a period of time. And it looks like an appropriate period of time from our perspective would be 3 years, as this is a 3-year rate study in which we would still be able to pay the city the fees that have been identified by the consultant in a manner that would be consistent with the Prop 218 requirements. And so we have also met with staff as they have discussed on Tuesday, and met with the finance director as well as part of that meeting to discuss options in being able to phase this in where we would still be paying our fair share, but we would also be able to phase this in a manner that would be more reasonable for us to do. And I know personally this is something that we have done in other elements of rate increases, at least in the solid waste side, that I'm also familiar with, where there's been class adjustments, not this large in proportion, but there's been a necessity to do an adjustment where we've elected to do it over time just because it's a reasonable implementation plan. And so I guess today we would ask the commission if they felt that that was a reasonable request, that that be voiced, so as this moves on to the city council for their final approval, that may be considered as well.
Thank you. And then Ms. Blackburn.
Mr. Chair, let me, I think, add some information to that regarding, so the meeting we had on Tuesday, the finance director, Bob Samario, offered up an option of a loan at a similar interest to our investments that would allow them, instead of having to pay those costs starting in August, could start to accrue those costs in some type of a loan that they would eventually pay back. It's outside of my purview, but the finance director seemed to think that this was something that he could work with. I don't think from our perspective we have an issue with it. It holds our customer class and is consistent with Prop 218. And I think if they're paying the cost of the investment, the interest that we're getting on that money anyway as an investment, it's kind of holding the public harmless on that. So those are the details we have today. I think Mr. Samario is kind of probably working through that and probably will reach out to Mr. Carlson to talk more about how that would work. But I don't know if there's any more questions on that. I don't know that I have any objections.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to acknowledge and say thank you for your willingness to work through this and working with the city. And I think that when it does come to council, that we'll all take that into account, that this has been sort of a large increase over a short period of time. And so just thank you for working with the city. Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Blackburn.
Good morning, members of the commission. My name is Berlinda Blackburn. I'm an environmental consultant for Marburg Industries. And I just had, for the sake of clarification, for the alcohol beverage manufacturing facilities, I wanted to know how you stated that the volume of flow was small, but is that still a concern if they are classified in this surcharge area? If they're considered high strength surcharge dischargers, how are you going to demonstrate that they should not be assessed this surcharge fee? Is it based on volume if they are the higher strength users? Just for clarification.
Yeah, this would be an event basis, so not an ongoing sampling. The purpose, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, is to develop this relationship so they notify us ahead of time when they're going to have one of these irregular discharges or dump a full batch. We would come out and potentially already have in place, although we're still working through some of the standard operating procedures, potentially sample them to determine their concentrations. And we'd work that through the math and determine their high surcharges, or use a standard rate for all of them to avoid having to sample each time.
Okay.
I apologize. I'm referring to their daily discharge because studies have shown that these facilities, although it may be a smaller discharge, the strength of the wastewater is still high for their daily operations, not just a bad batch.
Right, so their normal discharges would be included in their industrial rate, their commercial high industrial customers. That is allocated, they're higher strength customers, and they are allocated those costs below the 750 limit for the high strength surcharges. So the majority of that higher strength waste would be captured in their industrial rate. When they do have those events that are much more and above the high strength, we would come out and do it on an event basis billing.
And the way I heard you explain it too, it's pretty much an emerging set of data right now, or an emerging set of practices, right? That they are high strength, but you think they're not, the volume isn't pushing them into a category where we want to call them an HSS customer, except if they're going to throw a whole set of tanks at one time, and you can live with putting them in that industrial strength for those higher strengths right now, right?
But Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay.
I would say that it is an area that we're still exploring as we kind of, this is an emerging industry in town, and so we are still exploring this. And I think what has made them unique, and I know our pretreatment person has been working with them when they do have these bad batches in the past, it's been, well, if you're going to release that, let's talk about the timing in which you release that. So it's released over several days, depending on what the volume is, so that their discharge that they're, because they do have other water uses on site, their discharge that they're leaving is much more subdued. I think at the point with this high strength, there could come a point where time is money. They want to get that thing emptied out and they want to get a new batch brewing. And in that case, they may be willing to pay the money to discharge it all at once so that they can get back into business. And so I think we're still developing that as we start to get our grapple with this new industry in town.
Okay.
Well, if I could just for the record state that on a daily basis, these facilities will discharge higher than your HSS trigger level, and I would hope that you would consider assessing them the same fee that you're assessing Marburg. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Further questions or comments from anybody? I'll just then echo Councilmember Sneddon's gratitude to Marburg to continuing to put up with us through this process for several months. And I think, in the comments on who goes in that category and emerging breweries and wineries versus what we're calling high-strength septic tank or porta potty, one of those is clearly emerging, and one of those has been around for a long time. And one way to look at the problem we're in right now is somebody's been subsidizing the high-strength stuff for decade or decades, and it's pretty established, and we can track it. Another twist I would throw on your conversation with Mr. Samario is, this is above our pay grade, but I could see also if there's a pre-treatment capital expense option for Marburg to pre-treat at existing facilities, get it down out of the high-strength thing, but that's going to cost you a number with a bunch of zeros on the end of that. Maybe that's the loan you want, rather than just some cash to get you through the rate thing, and then you have a rate issue on there. But if there's an infrastructure improvement you can make on site to get you out of that category for this type of stuff, maybe that's your low interest loan you want to help bridge this time to get there. So I don't know, just another thought or idea. Okay, nothing else? All right, thank you very much, and thanks for bringing that back for another month. We'll move on to the next item, 2019 Public Health Goals Report.
Good morning, Chair Jordan and Commissioners. I'm Kathy Taylor. I'm the city's water system manager. And under the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1996, every 3 years we are to present a public health goals report to the Commission, and then I will submit it to the State Water Resources Control Board. And the report is a listing of contaminants in our water that exceed the representative public health goals per the Health and Safety Code section 11647B. And the public health goal is a concentration of contaminant in the drinking water that poses no significant health risk if consumed over a lifetime. The public health goals, keep in mind, they are goals, not regulations, and they are developed and published by the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment using current risk assessment principles, practices, and methods. The Public Health Goals report is required to present the numerical health risk for a contaminant along with the category of health risk, such as a cancer. The cancer health risk, if any, is to be calculated at the public health goal and at the California maximum contaminant level. An MCL, or maximum contaminant level, it's a legal threshold for how much contaminant we can have in the water. And I'm pleased to say that all of our water meets all of the MCLs.
And as you will see with this item, and I think we're always looking for help from our Water Commission. This is one of, I think, a frustration from us in the industry is having these two different standards is really confusing to the public. And as we kind of work through this, welcome any insight, and hopefully you can go home and share with your family and friends the difference between a MCL and a PHG.
So the constituents in the city's drinking water that exceeded the public health goals were arsenic, total coliform bacteria, lead, gross alpha particle activity, and uranium. And considering the best available technology, it would be costly to reduce these constituents below the public health goals. And it actually would estimate that it would cost each household anywhere between $268 to over $2,400 annually in the infrastructure upgrades we would have to install to reduce everything, all the constituents below the public health goals. Moreover, the associated cancer risk with not meeting the public health goal is very low, at 1 per 1 million cancer occurrences for arsenic and uranium, and 3 per 100 million cancer occurrences in lead. And there are no stated cancer risks for coliform bacteria or the gross alpha particle activity at the public health goal level. So, in conclusion, while these 4 constituents did not meet the public health goals, all of the city's water meets all the maximum contaminant levels as prescribed by the state and federal drinking water regulations. So with that, I will take any questions.
Questions or comments? Go ahead.
A couple questions. Does our overall concentrations, are they based on like a blend of all of our sources, or how do you guys calculate that?
Thank you. That's a really good question. We have sample stations throughout the city, and these constituents are prescribed sampling. It varies. Some are weekly, some are annually, some are every 3 years, but it's based. We have sample stations throughout the city.
And are we seeing a lot lower concentrations coming from the desal plant compared to somewhere else? Or?
Yes, it's different. It's a different water.
Yeah. All right, and I guess another question is, are there any changes in the MCLs that are coming that might affect anything we need to do as far as treatment? I know that's kind of like an ever-changing field.
At this time, not to our knowledge. The last big push was for the trihalomethanes, and we addressed that issue, and I'm pleased to say our trihalomethanes levels have all been very low as comparison to what they were historically.
Super.
Ms. Snedden.
Thank you. And for home filtration systems, or if a resident wanted to filter the rest of that out to meet the public health guidelines, public health goals. Mm-hmm. Would that be possible, or can we provide guidelines for what that would take?
I think what we've been recommending to customers when they do call about this is that they speak with a water treatment professional, because there are the in-home professionals we have here in town that can assist them with that, because each one of these has a different type of treatment with it. And so if they are concerned and want to address it, they'd have to work with them to figure out what it is they'd have to do.
And then they would be able to tell in their individual home which levels are the ones they're most concerned with, because this is not uniform across the city.
Correct. In that case, they would have to send their water out for specific sampling if they wished.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So most of these are present naturally, but lead is a tricky one because it's naturally present also in our groundwater, but it could also be in our pipes, particularly in older homes. So how are we educating the public in that particular one, and going back to what can they do? If they have an old construction, we have many in Santa Barbara, what are their options? What information are we providing them?
Well, I'm pleased that we have Galen Fair here, and that was one of the programs. We test for lead and copper every 3 years, and that's something that Ms. Fair heads up.
Commissioner Keller. Sorry. So the easiest way for a customer to reduce the lead in their home is to just flush the water for about 30 seconds, 60 seconds. You'd be amazed at how much lead is removed by just simply doing that. Short of that, they're having to either put in a filtration system or replace their plumbing, which can be very costly. So what we recommend is, again, contacting a home filtration company or flushing the plumbing. Our public outreach that we do on this a little bit, it comes out once a year. It's actually been coming out very shortly as our consumer confidence report. In there, we've got our water quality chart for the previous year, and we've got little blurbs on what the public can do for addressing specific concerns, and one of those is lead is in there.
We do not believe that we have a significant population of lead.
Correct. Yes.
Private.
Yes. So the city does not have any lead service lines anymore. That's been several years. But individual customers may have lead plumbing in their homes. But the level here is actually, this was our 90th percentile. I don't have the 100th percentile, but it was all of it was below the action level of 15. So it's actually very low. The 3.2 is very low for our 90th percentile. So there's not too many customers out there that are exceeding.
Ms. Fair, can you talk about, I know some of the programs we actually try, when we do that extensive program, we actually trying to get into the older homes, like that's part of our target when we grab samples?
Actually, as part of the lead and copper rule, the target is between 1983 and 1987, which is interesting. There was a batch of old or bad copper, and then lead also contributes to that. But what we have found is it's difficult to get a lot of public to volunteer for this program. I mean, we're basically soliciting them, sending them a letter saying, hey, can you sample your water for us? And what we found, since the city is so old and there's older homes in here, that's mostly what we get is the 30s. 1912, I think, was the earliest that we had gotten last round. So we're seeing most of those folks have galvanized pipe even.
Yeah.
So it's just a mixed bag of all the residents.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll agree with you. This is a terrible report to have out in public because it just sends such the wrong message. And the last paragraph is horrible. Like, although we don't meet this, we're okay because of that. I mean, it goes back to, don't eat butter, eat margarine. Oh no, don't eat margarine, eat butter, right?
This is truly, bad government. Our job here is to provide clear, concise information to the community, and this does not help us to do that. And again, we want to be focused on things that are really impacting public health. And when you have these extreme 1 in 100 million kind of odds, I think growing older has greater odds of cancer than that. It's a lot higher than that. So it's difficult to quantify that. How do you compare that to other things that you interact with in your daily life that also have the potential for causing health issues? And so I think this whole report is challenging for us. And what's the frequency?
Every 3 years. So this covers 2016, 17, and 18.
Okay.
So we'll be back in 2022 with the next report.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we want to take this opportunity to put the overall, the water quality is good, or?
Yes, the water quality is good. It meets all state and federal regulations, and keep drinking it.
Okay.
Water quality, it's a great opportunity. Water quality, I don't believe has been better for the city. With all the investments we've made over the years in our surface water treatment plant with ozone and changes in our how we manage the system so that the water that consumers are using is actually younger, which once you get it treated, you want people to use it. So we are actively watching that very closely. The addition of desal, the addition of our Ortega groundwater treatment plant, I feel comfortable saying that our water quality is really top notch. And we do this reporting, but I'm really pleased with where we are, and I think our community can feel safe in the water that they're drinking, and we encourage them to move away from bottled water and to drink tap water.
Yeah, and I will add that our drinking water is more regulated than bottled water.
Right.
We are regulated by the EPA, where the bottled water is regulated by the FDA. And I recently did a cost comparison in the same volume of water. If you paid $1 for your bottle of water, it's like 2,000 times more for the same volume of water out of your tap. And we have a much smaller carbon footprint as well.
What's more, I know I got to spend 8 hours last week traveling back and forth with crazy water engineers, and one of the things we did talk about was water quality and their assertion that despite what you see wherever on Nextdoor with people saying, the water smells or the water's not good, from a scientific standpoint, the water coming out of our tap is way better quality than any bottled water that's been sitting on a shelf for a year somewhere leaching plastic, and that point was made crystal clear to me by people with PEs after their name and that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty happy with that too.
I appreciate your reusable container there.
Well, this is a great opportunity to showcase that we have actually really great water quality, and I drink right out of my tap and always have, and so I appreciate knowing that that's a good idea. So thank you. And I think a little bit in the messaging of this that it's, even though internally we have all these different standards, I think the overall messaging is that we have good water.
Have good water. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll also note I had no public speaker slips for this item either, so we will move on to the next item, which is the SLIP update, Sewer Lateral Inspection Program update. Welcome back.
Thank you. Chair Jordan, Commissioners, my name is Galen Fair, Acting Wastewater System Manager. Here today to give you an update on our sewer lateral inspection program. We were here a couple months ago telling you of all the things we've been exploring. As we know, this program is has been a lot in the public, and so we've been doing our due diligence trying to really update this program and make it whole. So today I'm going to give you just a little bit of background and then share with you what we have done with our enhanced communication, with our cost controls. And last time we were here, there was a strong feeling to have inspections required at the time of sale of a home. So we're going to touch briefly on that at the end. So a little bit of background. In the city, we've got roughly 300 miles of sewer lateral, about 25,000 connections. Sewer lateral is the plumbing that connects a building to the city's sewer main. The homeowner is responsible for the maintenance and repair of this, including the connection or the Y. This ownership of the Y connection has been rather contentious with the public. But our forefathers at some point in time probably had decided that if there was no house connecting to the main, there would be no, there would be no connection. So in that matter, it was left to the homeowner to be responsible for the maintenance of that connection. And all of these laterals and connections are considered privately owned infrastructure. And just a little bit of background on our SSO events. Last year, we had a fantastic year, only 7 sewer system overflows. That was just, I don't think we can get any lower. The 5 of those, so 71%, were caused by roots from laterals. So there's no possible way we can really get this number lower without addressing the lateral issue of roots coming from the laterals. So in comparison to our public spills, here are our private spills, known as private lateral sewer discharges, and this is over the last few years. In 2018, we had 23 private spills, which we were aware of. I'm sure there are others that happen on private property that we are not informed of. To date this year, we have 13 spills, so private spills. So we are on track, it looks like, 26 perhaps, maybe 30. So we really need to jump on these private laterals and get the maintenance and the repair done on these so we don't have additional spills.
So I think this is a challenge, and we haven't come up with a solution yet. I mean, I'm sure there are many sewer lateral backups and spills that we're just not hearing about. These are just the ones where they've called us to support because the spill has been too big or they need help. But I think I don't really have a good solution at this point to kind of gather what is the total volume. But I think it's hopefully is a start in trying to quantify the problem. And then so this is the problem on the private side, and then these are also leading to challenges with the public system.
But note also that you track this both legally and procedurally by actual spills. And that's just a consequence of a problem that is potentially bigger, and that's just damaged laterals that are seeping and leaking that eventually lead to intrusion or something that leads to spill. And we actually have no obviously the number is bigger than any of those numbers on there that exist, and we really have no way to go out and chase that without an inspection, right?
Chair Jordan, you're
Okay.
absolutely correct.
But, so it's to me, that's kind of a limiting chart of
It
the
is.
overall problem.
It is.
And you should say that. Okay.
And every single one of these spills that we do become aware of, we require the homeowner then to do an inspection to see how in depth the problem really is. So our SLIP program has two aspects to it, commercial properties and residential. So our commercial properties are on a 10-year reinspection frequency. They're required to be inspected every 10 years, regardless of the condition. And those are going to be condominiums and multi-unit residentials.
And how far into that 10-year are we?
We are going to look at that in 2 slides, but it started. We started the cycle in 2013, so we're right about midway. We're hoping to finish the cycle in 2023.
And I think the intent then would be to reevaluate as part of that program whether 10 years is appropriate. But I think it was a small enough customer class at the time that we felt like we could get our hands around that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In our residential properties, they're permit initiated, so if they have an addition of 400 square feet or more, or they add 2 or more new plumbing fixtures, they would be triggered to have an inspection. Also, if we find a defect during city main inspections, they will receive an inspection letter, and obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the private lateral spill. If there's a spill, they need to inspect.
How often is this city main inspection happening, or what triggers that? I mean, we just hear about that over and over. A whole block at a time needs to replace all of their Ys, and it's something they just never even was on their radar, and they want to know, like, why my block, and what is there a...
There's a portion, and I don't have the numbers offhand, but I have Bradley here. But we are required to do a certain percentage of the system clean it per year based on our consent decree.
So just like with the commercial program, we're working through inspecting our entire sewer main system, and we're approximately 60% of the way through, I would say, on a pipe-to-pipe basis, not mileage, but pipe. And so once we have inspected a sewer main, depending on the defect score we rate that main, that will cause us to either come back every year, every 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. So the 5-year, 10-year reinspection cycles for our sewer mains would be for mains that have minor defects that look relatively good that we don't need to, in some ways, babysit. Whereas the 1 and 3 year re-inspections would be we see more defects that would cause us to want to go back. And that would also typically drive our capital program too.
And then for, is that something that residents know ahead of time that inspection is coming, or what their timeline is for when that might happen so they can plan ahead?
So that's a great question, and we are working on our public outreach in order to start getting further notifying out our capital program. And so right now, there hasn't been very much warning or very much communication on when that is coming. But as what Galen will be speaking to a little bit later is how we'd like to start changing our program and changing our communication methods to give them more warning and maybe give them more time to start saving up for potentially some repairs.
Thank you. And I have another question too. So it's at about 60% going through. When would be is that sort of a baseline of the map of when you then need to go back and re-inspect? So what's the timeline for all of that being completed? Roughly.
Yeah. So the reason we're at 60% is when we entered the consent decree in 2011, 2012 timeframe, we had a huge emphasis on inspecting pipes in the worst watersheds. So Laguna watershed, the Arroyo Burro watershed that have documented more bacteria, which was kind of why we focused there. That got us quite a bit of our mileage, but since then we've had to commit so many resources to re-inspecting the pipes that we can't get to because of capital expenditure limitations. That's sort of slowed us down on the new pipe. So our goal right now, I'd say, is we're looking at getting some new CCTV equipment that might be able to increase our production. And the hope is that probably in the next 5 to 7 years, we would have the remaining 40%, give or take, at least inspected once. And that's the goal.
Well, I think there are a lot of residents who are not in a hurry for that. So thank you.
So, Councilmember Sneddon, we do have our presentation to council next week on an update on our annual report. And those are right in line with some of those questions. Right now, the consent decree, it's one of the challenge with it is it limits the city in what we can do within that agreement. And one of the things is if you're not repairing certain things, you have to revisit them and have them re-inspected, even though we know it's not going anywhere and we know it needs to be repaired. We just don't have the capital funds yet to do it. We now have to dedicate the inspecting it when we could move on and inspect other things. So hopefully this will be the last year of the consent decree, and in which we will be changing up our operations and being able to shift resources to start TVing all the lines that we haven't seen yet, instead of keep TVing the same line that we've already seen and we know there's a problem with it.
So here's a timeline of the program. Started in 2007. And we had an incentive program when it started, which was wildly popular. Property owners received a $2,000 reimbursement for repairing or replacing their lateral. There was some cost savings for inspection as well. But what we found was that the price for repair ended up going up as a result of that. So fast track to current day, we no longer offer the incentive, and we've got our 2 programs here, the commercial with the goal of inspecting all commercial properties by 2023. Residential, we don't have a frequency requirement for inspection. That's something that we're batting around trying to determine what the appropriate frequency is. And currently for residential, we do waive the permit fees only if the city requires inspection. So if they receive a letter from us, they get their permit fees waived. We're thinking about exploring the option of if somebody's proactive and knows there's a problem, they want to get this stuff handled, why do they have to pay the fees when others who are not being proactive do? So. Okay, here's the current status of our SLIP program. I think this really shows why the public is kind of up in arms about everything, and why our public outreach is so important at this stage. So we have 1,088 current active cases. So that is our workload. Right now we have 3, almost 2.5, dedicated personnel to this program. That does not include Mr. Rare's time, and he spends quite a bit of it on this program as well. So,
it's actually 1.5, and we're borrowing a person from engineering who we're just paying their salary to help us with this. And one of the things that we'll be coming back to you this summer is to talk about resources to really make sure that we have the staffing to manage this program and be responsive.
So I had a question. Well, do you have more in your presentation? Sorry, I could ask at the end.
No, go ahead.
So in terms of staffing and coordination, so this, we get a lot of letters.
Of course.
And it'll be on a block and different residents, and they don't know that the other residents on the block, and they're wondering about coordinating. So you do street closure, or does that come through the city? And then I had a letter where someone, their lateral goes through both county and city, and how to coordinate. And I know you have a lot of questions about we get a lot of questions about it. And do you have enough staffing to be able to handle that? We're doing this program and we need to, and it's important, but then also I'm just looking at, some blocks are very simple, like in San Roque, a linear block, everything on there because it was cambered and it has to be replaced. And could there be an economy of scale of coordinating those residents together or pooling.
Absolutely. We think there's a lot of room for improvement here, and I think the good or bad, the success of this program, the need for this program is we really haven't caught up to the resources that really need to be plugged into making this a success. I think we've been trying to manage this on a really lean budget, trying to do be proactive at getting out to community, but I think unfortunately we are damaging our relationship with the community by not having the resources for someone to actually spend the time, walk them through it, understand it, do some of those coordination. If we just sent out 4 on one street, trying to see what we could do to try and get that work done relatively at the same time, maybe it's the same contractor. All of that just takes staffing resources to coordinate it, and I completely agree. And that's why I think when we're revamping this program, you won't get anybody in staff disagreeing with us. Is that yes, we could do better, and I think right now we're just trying to figure out how do we do that in a cost-effective way. We certainly and like I said, we're right now borrowing someone from engineering and just trying to figure out, okay, what are the resources we need to make this successful.
I think we should really look at this in terms of the budget and whatever, because I do agree it is damaging the relationship. And for a lot of people, water comes through their pipe, no problem. They don't interface with the city for anything. And then they get these notices, and then it's quite expensive. They're not prepared. They see the whole street, and I think so much positive could happen from them understanding why it needs to happen, but also the coordinating. So if there's an ask during this budget cycle or something through the Water Commission, I would just encourage that it's, I think, really important.
Yes.
We empathize. We do.
And that's why we think our enhanced communication is so important. So this is the stuff that we have nailed down to date. We've got a new website. We've upgraded our SLIP website as well as our whole wastewater system. We've got public outreach materials, including graphics, pamphlets, improved notification letters. So when somebody does receive a letter, it's more clear on the reason, and then much more customer support. And we know that is so very important. So we've got, where's the mouse? We've got our new website, and what our thoughts on this website is we're pushing data to the customers. So if they need to find something, they can go to our website, whereas in the past it was very minimal. So I'm going to pull up our new SLIP website, if it will launch. And you're going to see some of these. And it really explains ownership and maintenance responsibilities. We've got a new graphic, which I will go into a little bit later. Resources for residents, businesses, plumbers. So depending on why you're coming to the site, you can click on one of those buttons. We also are really pushing the information towards them. What is the life expectancy of a sewer? What are some of the maintenance issues that you're going to experience from your lateral? What are the inspection triggers? It's really telling the whole story of why this program exists and what you need to do if you received a letter. So we think that we've done a fantastic job on this. And it's still a work in progress. We're updating it continually. We've got our staff. They're now trained on how to update the website ourselves. So as we see things or we find there's more information that needs to be put on the website, we can do it ourselves, which is, I think, very important. And then we also have our who everybody is and who to contact. So you guys can go poke around there, as I see Chair Jordan has already started to do. You're ahead of me. So the next that has been extremely important is our public outreach materials. Infographics, this one is borrowed, but it gives a good description of what a lateral is. You see a gentleman taking a bath there, and the possible tree roots getting into your lateral and how it connects to the sewer main. We also have informational pamphlets, and again, I said our improved notification letters. So we'll go into the graphics that we've had help developing. This, I think, is extremely important for all of our customers, knowing, first off, that they own the lateral and where that ownership lies. So everything in orange is what the property owner owns, and that includes the connection. And there's a close-up of that connection. So you can see our main in gray, and the connection is owned by the customer. So that gives them a good visual of what's going on beneath the ground. This one, I think, is fantastic. It's the life expectancy based on common household items. So folks who own a home or have to replace any items in their home, they're kind of aware of what needs to be done. So I know right now I've got about 10 years on my water heater. It's getting towards the end of its life, but I'm thinking about that and I'm expecting it to fail any minute. Roofs, 25 years, 30 years. So these are things people kind of have an idea of what the lifetime is. Because the sewer lateral is underground, nobody's really thinking about it. So first we're trying to get out, hey, you own the sewer lateral, but then how long is it supposed to last? So we're saying 50 plus years. If you bought your house and it was built in 1946, you've gotten your expected lifespan out of that lateral, but you didn't know you owned it. So
it's getting to kind of trying to, through education, when you do get a slip letter and you do have a 60-year-old lateral, you're like, yeah, I kind of expect that to be coming. That would be I think my dream if I were to get to the end of this, is that you have that kind of expectation with the community that they're getting this letter and it's not like, I own this. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, I kind of was anticipating it. We've may have had it cleaned, 10 years ago, and yes, it's getting to the end of its useful life. So it's not the surprise. I mean, someone comes out there and you have a 40-year-old roof and they say, hey, your roof needs replaced. They're like, yeah, I kind of expected that. So I think setting expectations, and again, this isn't going to happen overnight, but trying to just educate people about what that is. And so if it needs to be replaced every 50 years, how often does it need to be looked at? And I think that's one of the questions that we're working on and trying to answer, and hopefully then start setting that expectation. And you should have it, should have your looked at, some maintenance done on it on this kind of frequency.
I think this would be a great thing to put in on that yellow flyer that comes in with your bill every month. Maybe a little summary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You own the lateral.
Yes,
Keep
and
that in mind.
We're working on these informational pamphlets, which I'll get into, but they're going to be included with the notification letters. So it will be very helpful when someone does receive a notification letter. They will also receive a pamphlet, and it will have a lot of that information on it as well.
Aren't you guys able to gather data on where, if it's not where there was a problem by a street or a neighborhood, that you actually know that there's been no permit issued in 50 years and they're old?
Staff time.
Okay. So
I would imagine there are. Yes, I would imagine there are.
No, but so
ways
my point is, when you're talking about not making it a surprise to my street or area on the Mesa, is we're doing nothing proactive to actually then shoot out a version of this information as a flyer or a pamphlet right to them now, saying, we pretty much think your sewer lateral is reaching the end of its life expectancy. It's 50 years old. Here's what it's all about. The city's moving towards better compliance and better enforcement, if you want to use that word with whatever it is, and you should be ready or look into getting it inspected now. Because it would seem to me you could target high known areas where they're old, or known areas where it's an issue for a watershed or something else going on.
So we're getting back to the resources, right? So that proactive, as you saw, we already have a long list, and that's just the people that we're coming across our commercial program already. And so the question is, if we start proactively, it'd be great. It's exactly where we want to go. But the spike is going to be, the people that we have reviewing videos, because those videos come in and we actually have a person who goes through the video and says, yeah, I agree, this needs to be replaced, or no, I think this is good. So we actually do the review of these CCTV videos, and that takes time, and then you have to meet with the customer. So getting back to, I think that's a great idea. I have no objection to it. We need to match that up with the resources so that we could be successful.
You would have the same response probably if you were told that if you got a street or a neighborhood and you had a burp on the increase in permits issued, that should somebody in staff be able to actually look at that and say, hey, here's an area that's active, and we should do a target mailing there too. Be same thing, resources, and how do you get to that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's good. And I think, as you're all pretty familiar with, the city had an explosion of development following World War II. And so it's all that 1950s, 1960s. And so we really had a lot of growth in that time period. So we're right at that, that time threshold, right?
Just one more on that too. I think if coordinating with, I mean, it does tear up the road quite a bit, and if you're doing one at a time, so maybe there's some Measure C funding or something in when a road is going to be resurfaced, that at that time look at maybe those homes should be noticed. It's going to be resurfaced. If you are near the end expectancy of your lateral, maybe this is a good time to look at that.
Mr. Rare has, our superintendent, has really taken that exact point, and he's been working with our streets group. You know, as they're trying to get a pattern set up of where they're going to be, he's trying to stay one step ahead of them. And I think that's been kind of the flurry, is he's going out, TVing those lines, sending people letters. And I think the challenge is the street paving is coming and their window for doing it is tight. And I don't have the money now. So that's leading to some of the anxiety you've probably heard. And so our goal would be to get out there 2 years before the street paving's going. And I think we'll get there as soon as, you know, the Measure C kind of sets in and they get their program scheduled. But Mr. Rare has been really working to try and get ahead of that. And I think that's what's caused some of the angst with people is
That makes sense.
oh my God, I only have a couple months to get this done. Yeah.
Thank you.
More graphics. So this one is going to be helpful for folks when they are being asked to repair their lateral and explaining the different options. This will be in the repair pamphlet that goes out with the repair notification letter. And it explains, here we just have the graphic, but in the pamphlet it explains what exactly a spot repair is, what a new liner would be, and what new replacement pipe is. So it really breaks down based on what has been called out in your repair letter on what you specifically need to do for your own lateral. So here's a snapshot of, wow, that's yellow. Sorry. This is a snapshot of one of our informational pamphlets. It has the ownership graphic and the household item lifespan graphic in there as well. Again, it's going to describe the ownership of the lateral, and it really will explain the slip process and what a homeowner has to do if they receive the inspection notification letter. We also have one for repair. Explains how you go about repairing or replacing your lateral. Explains the difference between our repair, rehabilitate, or replace with that graphic you just saw. And then we also call out some things to consider when speaking to your plumber. Just helping folks along. And then here you can see there's a contact at the bottom. So if there's any issues or any questions that homeowners have, they can contact any one of our team. So improved notification letters. In the past, they were very authoritarian and directive. You shall, you will repair your letter, you will inspect. So with these new letters, they're much more collaborative. We're asking the property owner for assistance as opposed to directing them to do something. You can see that on the top it says, we've discovered an issue. To clarify the problem, we need your assistance. So we think the tone of the letter's much better. It's not as scary when you receive this, that there's going to be some punitive damage if you don't do anything. And we're really highlighting that we're trying to provide the customer support through the process. So here is our improved customer support. What we've come up with so far, obviously there's a ton that we still are working on in the background, and as ideas come through, we're writing those down. But what we've nailed down to date is availability sessions, some monthly public meetings, and then site visits with the property owner. As of right now, we have the third Wednesday of every month scheduled at El Estero after normal business hours. So this allows our customers to come in after work. If they can't take time off work which is a burden in of itself, to come in and have somebody explain what's happening, they can now come in after work. There would be a couple folks there. They would RSVP, make sure we've got people available. And go one-on-one explanations, review your inspection video if that's what you need, and then discuss your options for repair or rehabilitation. And then if this date does not work, obviously we are always available by appointment during regular business hours. This is one thing that we're really, I think is a great thing. We've done it periodically in the past. So now we're going to move to semi-annual presentations to the realtors. And this is going to be really to engage them in the process and get their thoughts on it, and then explain to them what our issues are with everything. So explain the slip process, the importance of the lateral maintenance and repair. The inspection standards are real big. A lot of folks will have, or it may be part of the home inspection, that is your sewer lateral in working order. Now, what the realtors say is in working order and what we say is in working order are two very different things. So we really want to explain to them these are our inspection standards when it's inspected.
Yeah, and I think it's really just having a common language. I've been having a friend in town who had, probably after I've talked to him, had his lateral inspected, and the plumber said, "Oh yeah, it's good. Water flows down it." And I think there's a lot of pressure to keep the sale going on this, but at the end of the day, he had some pretty big cracks in his lateral that were not identified, and unfortunately led to having to do some repairs after he bought the home. And so wanting to kind of make sure that we're all working with the same standards, so that when you're buying a home, it's not, water goes down it and it's good. It is, yes, but at 50 feet, there's a big lateral crack, and you're going to need to do something at some point with that, and you may want to talk to the seller or just prepare financially to tackle that when you become the owner. So trying to get that kind of information going, and so I think that's where we're hoping the realtors can help us with that.
Mm-hmm. And then the last thing we want to explain to them at these trainings are what the repair options are. So if it is determined that their lateral needs to be repaired at the time of sale, they can explain to their customer, their client, what the repair options are. And then lastly, site visits with the property owner. Again, we're really trying to model this after our water conservation water checkups. It offers the individual support. We can take a laptop or an iPad out on site and walk them through their video and discuss their repair or rehabilitation options. And I think we just had one last week or the beginning of this week, I can't recall, that plumber, our staff, and the homeowner all met together and had a nice discussion. Cost controls. Okay, so obviously we know there's a huge variability from home to home on what the costs are going to be. And everybody's lateral is slightly different, and the repair options will be different for everybody. So what we're trying to do is provide a baseline for those costs by going out to bid and having contracts in place.
Common story that we hear. A neighbor gets their lateral replaced, then another neighbor gets, and then they talk. And you got it done for what? Like, I got robbed, and all the and the conditions could have been drastically different. And that's part of it. I mean, it could have been a deeper lateral. It could have had, there more landscaping that had to be removed if it was an open cut. So there is a lot of variation in there, and I think it's what makes it difficult when property owners get quotes and they can't understand why their quotes are vastly different either. And so our attempt here is to try and bring some uniformity to it, but recognizing that we are also recognizing some risk in this, because we are saying that we're going to go out to bid, here's going to be the costs, and if so it gets into construction and there's some variability with that, the city's saying we're going to take the hit on that, and it's kind of, we're looking at kind of a uniform. We're not going to be going back and forth with the property owner about change orders and things of that nature as these stands. So anyway, we're starting easy and we're working into the more complex work, but.
So just a review of what the inspection process is. A homeowner will get the inspection letter. They have 45 days to submit a video. Property owner will then hire a plumber. Plumber inspects the lateral. Plumber submits the video to the city, and then the slip coordinator reviews the video. So that orange arrow is a portion where we think we can assist our homeowners with a potential contract. So we are planning on taking a item out to bid for an inspection and cleaning contract, and what that would do is we would have a set price for cleaning and inspection. The customer could use this competitively selected plumbing contractor, and then the city would coordinate with the customer to help them through that process. It's very confusing. Who do I call? What is it going to cost? Should I call 3 different plumbers and get quotes? Yes, we recommend that, but not everybody's privy to that. So it really does offer a cost control and simplicity to the property owner. They can compare our bid prices to the private quotes that they may go out and check on. And they can also take advantage of our city project manager for coordination. So in this case, with the city coordinating it, project manager would go out there and help them walk through this process. So we're developing specs for this currently, and we anticipate to go out to bid in June and hopefully get this one in play. So similar for our repair process. So someone does do the inspection. Now they are notified that they need to repair their lateral. At this point, we've got 90 days. I think we may have changed that already to 120. Then the property owner has to decide on a repair solution and have the plumber or contractor complete the repair. So again, the orange arrow is where we can offer some competitive pricing and assistance.
So I think our challenge with this is for the lower, what I call the lower lateral. So once it hits the public right-of-way to the main, that I feel like we can probably tackle with this. Where it gets really more complicated is when you talk about work on private property. The rehab, that may be something we can bid out, but it gets really difficult to talk about open cut and trying to get a uniform bid for that because you got landscaping and other things that go on their property. So this is one's taken us a little more time to try and come up with. I think the lower lateral, like I mentioned, would probably be the low-lying fruit that we probably could come up with just because that area is in the public right-of-way already, and more uniform street, sidewalk, curb, gutter, things like that.
When you see most of the work being pulled, is it, where is it? Is it in the right-of-way or the Y, or is it all over the place?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Rare on that one.
That's a great question as well, Chair Jordan. The most complicated work that we're finding is in the right-of-way. And so as we're inspecting sewer laterals, as we're driving by with our CCTV camera, that's generally the first thing that starts that inspection. And we know there's something that's going to happen in the right-of-way. And that's a high percentage of the cases we are sending out now. So 3-5 years from now, that may change if we have a different trigger inspection method. But because so much of our cases are starting with the defect at the connection to the sewer main, we do find that there's at least, that repair that happens in the roadway or the right-of-way to start it, and then some of them also have an element on the private.
Right.
On the private
but there's
side.
a whole other class of work, and that's either a guy pulls a permit and does the inspection. It's not your inspection, or a guy has a backup and and realizes there are problems. So of those ones, is the culprit still out in the right of way, or is the culprit in between, underneath my house and the sidewalk? We don't know.
I would say one of the major questions, it comes to my desk. I don't see every case, but most of the questions I get are referring to that street tree.
Okay.
And generally, when that street tree is causing the roots,
Okay.
the repair is somewhere close to the
Close to the right of way, if not in it, most of the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
because that tends to be where a lot more of the landscaping is, kind of in that range.
Okay, thanks. So I guess just the connection I'm trying to make is concentrating on the right of way is the biggest return on investment, right? From our standpoint.
I think it's more uniform.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So let me throw something out there that comes across my desk a lot, and it may help you when you're talking with the community about it. Is your street tree roots have gotten into my lateral, and why do I have to pay for this? And the answer is a lateral that is well maintained. Tree roots cannot get inside. So your lateral was fine for 50 years. the joints were holding up, but as that pipe degrades, soil movement or whatever it is, it opens up enough that the roots can get in there, then the street tree roots become a secondary problem. But if the lateral is maintained properly, then tree roots cannot get in there. And so it's the chicken and the egg thing, but not in this case. A well-maintained lateral is not going to have street tree roots or exfiltration from the pipe. And so I think it's a tough one because I think people immediately look, that's not my tree that's doing that. Yeah, I agree, but it's not what started this whole discussion. What started is your lateral aged out.
Mm-hmm. Just one input. I think that from the city perspective, that the right-of-way would be where a uniform bid might be really helpful. But once you get on private property, the variability there is just, such high variability. And I wouldn't have an expectation as a homeowner that the city would be taking care of that for me. But I think a lot of people under the right-of-way, involving permits with the road, and you have to coordinate so much with the city just to fix that part.
Yeah. The one thing where it does maybe is the rehabilitation. So what they would do is they would start from the house and put their liner in all the way out to the city main. So if their lateral was in a condition that's all they needed to do was reline it, then you could do the whole stretch, right? But if you're talking about a replacement, then yeah, I think that's where someone's having to dig it up. Then I think we really need to stop that work right at the back of sidewalk somewhere there. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. When you say well-maintained, I'm trying to understand because the only options I see for a homeowner is inspect and, if necessary, repair. But there's no maintenance you can do in between, is there?
Well, I think now there is. You can line it. So there are liners now that you can pull inside. You could pull through, and jointless pipe. It doesn't have any joints in it, so there's no room for laterals to get or roots to get in. And so that is an option, I'd say, that is now becoming more prevalent. There's more and more contractors showing up in town that can do that technique. And so typically, some don't even need to dig a pit in the street. Some of the older technology needed to have a pit in the street, and then, of course, at the house, and then they could pull the whole new line in. But that technology is getting even better where they don't even have to have a pit in the street. Just for our end, we're concerned about how that pipe gets finished off when it touches our main, but we're working through those issues. But yeah, so I think there are options to maintain your pipe without physically digging it all up.
Mm-hmm. So some of the cost control measures that we're working on currently, we've got a contract with a local contractor to do sewer tap replacement. And basically, this is going to be one of the options. We're going to have two options for this new sewer contract or sewer tap contract since it is due for renewal. First option is status quo. And basically what that is a customer, if they need to repair their Y connection, they will need to select a plumbing contractor. Plumbing contractor will have to obtain a permit, then excavate a pit in the right-of-way. However, to maintain quality control of our system, we have the city contractor jump in that pit, do the connection, jump out. Then if any repairs are needed for the rest of the lateral, the plumbing contractor would do that at that time with the pit exposed. But then the plumbing contractor fills in the pit and restores pavement. So that is status quo, what we have right now, and we will continue moving that forward.
You're using that graphic. Again, you should put in plumbing contractor in front of repairs. So it reads a little bit like, I'm not sure who you're talking about there.
Yes, thank you. I noticed that as I was saying it. So option 2, this is where we think we're going to have a lot of folks leaning towards. So new option is going to be excavation and the sewer tap replacement. So this would be the contractor, the city bid contractor, doing the excavation. So what we find is going to be very helpful to a customer is that if a customer selects this option, they will notify the city and pay a certain fee. What that fee is, we have to wait till the bids come in. Could be $4,000, could be $5,000, somewhere around that. The benefit of this, the work would be coordinated by the city and performed by the city contractor. So the homeowner really doesn't have to do anything at this point. They say, I want to use this option, here's my money, and then the city coordinates the work, coordinates with the contractor. City staff would have to locate the lateral connection and then schedule the replacement. And then the excavator, the contractor would go out and excavate the pit, perform the Y replacement, and then restore the site. So one of the benefits of this is if we've got several people on one block, we can have the contractor go out and do all that stuff in the same week, same day, so it's less impact to the public on that specific street.
Now, the irony to this is the city, in my mind, shouldn't be able to do this cheaper than the public, but we've seen the prices all over the place, and the coordination that was having to happen before was, I think, making it inefficient. So we have to pay, as I understand, prevailing wage on these kind of jobs. And the other issue that we're still working with our attorney's office on, at the end of the day, the homeowner owns this. This is if there's a workmanship issue, that's a relationship between the contractor and the customer. The city we facilitated this relationship, but we are not getting involved in some type of warranty issues.
So one of the other benefits of this option is that the Y connection seems to be the most complicated work. So if we can allow the customer to separate these two out, they can get their Y connection repaired and then maybe save up money to do the rest of their lateral at a later date. So this, I think, is going to be I think it's going to be popular, but we have yet to see that.
This would fix 100% of the letters and the meetings that I've been having on this issue. Like, this fixes every single question with that. You have elderly people, they're like, how do I coordinate the permit with the road and the contractor? And they get the permit, and what does that cost? They didn't get the permit, have to another plumber, and have to pay for another permit. So this is excellent. And my question is, how soon might that be online if that was the option? And if current people who have letters who are in this 45-day, 95-day, if this is coming by summertime, if maybe there could be an allowance for people to, well, I'm going to take that option when it comes online. Can I extend it if I agree to taking this option?
Exactly, Councilmember Sneddon, that is exactly what we would like to have happen. So we are slated for July 1st to have this contract in place. And if there are customers that would like to take this option, have them give us a call and say, can I get an extension? And we will make things available to them.
I think once we get the bids, we can send it out to those and say, hey, just let you know this is a new option that's available to them. I think right now we don't have any, I think we say we're working on this, but we don't have any new numbers to go with it. Again, I think we still need to talk about the staffing resources to manage this, because I think it will be popular, and as you can see, we're managing this contractor and getting everything lined up, and it's just that's something we don't have right now.
And who should a person contact if this was something they were?
Currently, our SLIP coordinator, who is Dale Escobar, or you can refer them to our new website.
Okay,
and everybody's on there.
That's what I will do. Thank you.
Okay, so the last is our inspection requirement frequency. Again, last time we were here, time of sale was really, Commission wanted to push us in that direction, which I think we all agree is a perfect time to have an inspection requirement. However, we have gotten some pushback, and so we are still batting those inspection frequencies around. So what is appropriate for our lateral inspection frequency? Commercial properties obviously are required every 10 years. Should we do something similar for residential properties? If we were to do that, just to put it into perspective, we have roughly 25,000 lateral connections. So if we were trying to get those on a 10-year cycle, we'd be looking at 2,500 cases every year, just for residential. So we are barely holding our heads above water with 800 cases. So to add-on multiple times more than that is going to be not where we want to go at this point in time. Time of sale, again, that seems to be a good frequency, but again, we have to engage our stakeholders on that. One thing that we've been really exploring is coordination with our capital improvement. So as we're going through and we're repairing our mains or replacing our mains, that's the time when we can get a group price for everybody that's on that main line and say, hey, we're coming through. It will cost you this amount if you do it when we are coming through. However, it could cost you several times more down the road. So we're really exploring that, and I think it will be an excellent option for homeowners should they be on a line that's part of our capital improvement.
Yeah, again, I go back to this. I'm hoping we can work through the legal issues of ownership, because it means that you're having a city contractor touch private property, and it's always kind of a dicey one. And so we're very fortunate to have Mr. Henschke on our team and to help us create some agreements that would make sure that responsibility is clearly between the contractor and the property owner, and we're not going to be dragged into future issues related to that.
I have to say I'm super supportive of that. I think we can get a lot better pricing if the contractor that's already in there doing the work is able to give the homeowner a competitive price or a more competitive price, and it just totally makes sense to me. So
just to be clear, when it says time of sale, is that prior to when it gets listed, the person who's going to sell it would get it, or is it at escrow? Would there be some disclosure that it has been inspected and here's the information, or that you need to inspect it before you close? So I think that all those are important questions that probably have not been defined, but it would be good to sort of figure out when we say time of sale, what does that really mean? Because what we don't want to do is, surprise them at that point. It should be clear when it happens. No?
Right, Commissioner Keller, you're absolutely right, and we're in talks with some of the realtors organization. I had a quick phone call with one of them not too long ago, so we're still exploring all this in the background, but since it's going to take quite a bit of staffing resources, and we want to make sure that we have all of our program changes in place before we really trudge down that path of at time of sale. So we're looking to revisit that one, specifically the time of sale and frequency, probably next year in 2020. Next steps. Okay, one more slide. Obviously, we want to receive feedback from Water Commission. The questions you've had so far have been fantastic. It really gives us things to think about. And then we'll return again in summer of 2019 this year with updates. We are currently evaluating our staff workload. As we make these program changes, we're realizing we do need more staff. So what that looks like, how many, we'll have an idea soon. We do want to explore our financial assistance options, what those may be in the future, and how to find some seed money. But we want to get some of these other items in place first. And then the last thing is the stakeholder engagement. We've got Hillary Hauser in the audience today, and she's been really helpful with, what is it, the research. Thank you. Yes, sorry. On what other folks are doing, and really giving us a different perspective. So that has been fantastic, and we're reaching out again to the realtors and some other folks in the community to get their take on this whole program. So, discussion and questions.
First, let's do public comment, since I know we have one. So, Ms. Hauser, up at the mic, and please make sure that little green light is on the base, please.
Chair Jordan, Commission, thank you so much for working on this issue, and I really thank Gail and Bradley and Joshua for the work you're doing on this. Heal the Ocean is committed to help with public communication on this issue. One thing that we touched on in our conversation was the approach to the homeowner being one of help. As I'm looking at some of the wording here, I'm seeing a lot of police imagery, you know, the ownership responsibilities, and it's your DLY. And what we found in septic work is a lot of people really didn't know. They just didn't know. And then they didn't know how to get out of it or get into it or fix it or anything. And so when we approach these homeowner groups with a solution and with financial help, they all jumped on. And so in the literature that reaches a homeowner, I feel it's really important because a lot of homeowners don't even associate rotor-rooters running around during the rain with what's going on. They just don't make the connection. And we have found that usually something that is bad in the environment or getting into the environment is really not cool in the home. So, but the homeowner not making the connection, the first piece of paper on top of all this is something to the effect of, are your sinks plugged up? Are you having bad odors in your house? Can you run your dishwasher? That's what we found at Rincon. These people couldn't even use their showers or anything, and they just didn't know how to deal with it and what was causing it. So I think approaching it from the assistance on the first page, are you having this unpleasant stuff happening? We can help. So, and I think it was brought up, I think, Galen, you know, the last point, one of the last points you brought up about when the city's coming down the street and this issue of right-of-way and all of that. Up at the Riviera, every now and then there are door tags that go on. They say, you know, for fire prevention, on Saturday, put all your tree limbs out in the street and we'll pick them up. It's a public, we're coming through on this day and we can help you there. So I, at the last of our conversation, was suggesting a door hanger or a flyer that says we're coming through to work on the sewer main. And if you have issues, if you've been calling Roto-Rooter, you know, I mean, something simple that says that this is the opportunity. The word to express is opportunity, not we're going to get you, inspect you. This is an opportunity to save a whole lot of money if we're digging out here, that you don't have to come back and do it later. But somehow, some simple door hanger saying the city is going to be working on its main, which has a direct connection to your home. It's going to make things better for you. And while we're doing this, is a good time for you to move forward. Just something simple that they can understand. Because believe me, I think that is going to get more attention than ownership responsibilities and so forth. And the point of sale issue, we all know, we worked on it and worked on it and worked on it years ago with the city, and the pushback is fierce. You know, this is the US of A. We've got enough regulations and so forth. But it is unfortunate because it's when all the money is on the table, and it just that the plumbing is just as important as the roof. We can't get it through on the septic system situation either. And our office has received calls from people who just bought a house and, oh my God, we don't even have a lateral. And they didn't think to ask. So, but anyway, in the public education part, even if it's in the monthly billing envelope, do you have unpleasant, have you had to call Roto-Rooter a lot lately? Contact us. We can help you out or something with help, opportunity, not inspection. We're coming through, police. So but we're here to help. Thank you. And thanks for the work you guys are doing.
Thanks. All right. Reactions, discussion, questions? Okay, you're going to make me lead off again. I got a whole bunch of notes here, so I'm just going to go through them all over the place. But Hillary's example of the door slips is kind of, I don't know, one of my always concerns about city bureaucracies. And in this particular case, even, we went out and hired a public relations firm to kind of help us with the obvious, right? Because no disrespect to you guys, but this isn't what you do for a living. And there's so many things these days in the city, everywhere, not just in your department, that are harder to explain every day. There's advocacy groups, there's crazy people, they just, everything's one end of the spectrum to the other, and it would really be a thought maybe to have on whether the city just in general needs somebody they can turn to on a contract basis of every department. And this department would be a particular case. Some of those things they helped you with, we helped you with, but they helped develop them. And why do we not have the in-house capabilities to do that? Why does each department, when they feel a need or are threatened by something, have to go out and get a PR firm to do that? So I think that's something to think about. It's just more money and time, of course. It's too late, but one thought I had for the RFP was it's clear from the answers to the questions I asked that part of the information we just don't gather readily, or we don't have the resources to do, is just to analyze what's going on out there, area by area, street by street, when Public Works is going out to do construction, getting out in front of that. And could you make the contract RFP for this also include some analyst help? So they would provide the analysts. So it'd be like putting the fox in the chicken house. I kind of get that, right? Because the better work they do, the more problems they're going to find. But can that not be somehow phrased to sound a little better than I just phrased it? That the expense for that analyzing trends and data would be borne by the awarding of that contract to that contractor that's going to do it too. So they could provide that service for the city. And obviously my assumption is that they could provide that much cheaper than if we went out and hired another person at $75,000 or $100,000 a year for the rest of their life. I like the idea of a scheduled time for lateral inspections, but I would not tie it to the commercial one. I would say maybe half the life of what you're expecting on a residential. So let's just say, for giggles, let's say 20 years. So every 20 years. And also the option that if you agreed to do it at your time of sale, that the clock starts over. So if you're, if you're at 10, but you think you got the resources, let's get this out of the way now so I can sleep at night. Let's get that out. And another, what's still really frustrating there is our lack of data on failure. This kind of goes back to where do we get the analyst help and how to, where is the failure, how often is the failure, what year is the failure, and the lifespan of what you did. I mean, Josh, I'm right there in that Mesa tract of 1960s houses, and I have a problem with my Y. I like the option, the definite option, the on-paper option of if you get to option 2 up there on the use of a contractor, to automatically giving the current notice holders an extension on paper. Get them out of the city, follow-up process for enforcement, and get them back. And you said summer, this will come back to us. I'd like this to come back to us as soon as you have information on that RFP. Sure. Which was summer, was June or July anyhow, so summer. And then I'd like you also to think not about siloing your resources. It's back to this kind of one water thing. This is a wastewater issue now. You might have resources over in clean water, say a market person that works with outreach on conservation that could apply her talents also, or has time to apply her talents based on the change of landscape there and conservation or whatever, and could help on wastewater with some of these issues too. And if we're tending to silo this as this is only a wastewater thing, I'd like to not silo it that way and tell anybody that tells me there's a legal issue there that's crazy. And if we have resources in the other side of the operation too, to be able to use those.
just a note, we've been pulling over some of the water conservation staff who've been helping out with the marketing and
Definitely.
notifications.
And then, as you know, from being trapped in a car for 4 hours on the way back last week with me, one of my big takeaways from last week was the media / outreach / PR person seminar that I went to. And the point there would be some of the things you've already done as a result of Katz and Associates, and that's simpler, more use of visuals, that kind of thing. One of the takeaways I got there was the literacy rate average in the United States is 8th grade. My nurse daughter tells me their training tells them to talk to patients as if it's 6th grade. So I'm not doubting anything I'm hearing, but so one of their points was way more pictures, way less narrative. If you're legally required to put the narrative in there, make sure you figure out a picture to go with it. So, but the other point I took away from that was you have to get to what these people called influencers early. And I think their influencers includes people who are positive and people who are negative. And that to me is the rental housing association, you're doing the realtors, the neighborhood associations, the active ones up in the Riviera or the Upper State Street area, but also the Allied one. From a commercial standpoint, the chamber, from commercial and residential, the large property management firms in town, those kind of thing, like the Wolfs or whoever else. But their point was that so much of our grief is self-inflicted because we allow our engagement to be this, where there's 2 people in the room, right? There's more people in the room on the board and on the staff than there are community members in town. And to expect that then the message gets out and is conveyed correctly as a result of that method of doing it is just absolute insanity. We have to get out in a out of formal type of environment and make presentations to people that we know are going to be influencers, either supporters or detractors, and work on some agreeables we can find with either one of those so that they then aren't doing 60 comments on Nextdoor that are just blowing up over one guy's comment over my neighbor was charged $10,000, I was charged $5,000, and why the heck are we even doing this anyhow when it's the city's property, right? And you've seen these, so I see them on the Mesa. And so to me, this is a function that is not a historical function of what you do for a living or probably an easy function, but I think that has to be that way in the future. You know, everything government does these days seems like it's just open season. And so we have to recognize that and try and get out in front of it. And I think I hit all my little notes. There must be more. No? Okay.
I'll say a few things. So it's encouraging. I'm glad that the city is moving towards trying to get some competitive bids for some of this stuff because this has been a tough item to swallow. And I'm encouraged that hopefully we'll get some reasonable competitive bids that people can start dialing in what the actual costs are in this thing. Just one question on that is, when we get the bids, are we selecting just one contractor, or are we going to? I mean, hopefully, theoretically, if we do something like that, maybe it'll make everyone else a little more competitive in that realm as well. But I'm just thinking long-term backlog of work if this is the best price and everyone comes to the city to get on this list.
That's a very good one because we knew if we did end up with one company, it was very likely they'd be overwhelmed with that. We are exploring this option. I don't know that we've finalized it, but this option in which the low bidder will get the first call, and if they are unable to respond in a certain amount of time, then any other bidder who's willing to match that cost will also be able to provide that service. So we're exploring how exactly to make that function, but we are recognizing, at the end of the day, I'd love to get the lowest price, and I'd love to make, if any contractor can match that lowest price, I'd love to make them all available to that. And I think that's what we're trying to get at the end of the day.
Okay, great. Yeah, just glad we're looking at that option. That's kind of what I was thinking too. So, and then yeah, back to the the time of sale inspection thing. I think you made a good point. Is like, what's the level of scrutiny, or what is the standards for looking at that, and who's going to do it? I didn't, thank you for sharing the numbers with us. Like, I didn't realize how many you guys are already looking at, and then when you add on top of every home sale in the city, it's, not realistic on a staffing perspective. But, and, that kind of goes to also, like, as a homeowner, what if I went in and just, like, cleaned the roots out, and then I go in and I see CCTV, and it looks like, oh, yeah, my pipe is great, but without, like, a properly trained person to look at it, you're not really seeing all the defects in the pipe. So, and I don't know what the answer is for that, but something to keep kind of looking at and pushing forward and seeing if we can.
So with one of some of our property owners who really are in a financial pinch and can't do it, that's been the option, that they agree to clean it and inspect it on a regular frequency. And so we've been working with them on that. Again, every time you clean and inspect it is $700, $800. So, the cost of replacement at $10,000 to quickly get there, but that at least gives them some more time to build up the money to find the funding to replace the entire one. But we are trying to come up with some of those hybrids, recognizing that it's a lot to ask if you don't have some type of equity line or something that you can tap into.
Yeah. So, anyways, really appreciative of all the work you guys are doing and trying to make options available for the residents and trying to get things a little more competitively priced and making it easier for them. So, keep up the good work.
Mr. Keller.
I think Chair Jordan touched on many of the points, but the only one that, a couple of, one was the maintenance information, because that was actually news to me, that there's actually maintenance options, and I think that should be more available, because, most people have no idea that they even can do maintenance on these things, and that would be useful to have as part of the outreach information and the sort of support that you can give that there. The other one is the financial part, and of course, we trying to figure out options so that maybe the $10,000 can be divided over a certain period of time and somehow get some financing for that. I know it's difficult, but it needs some seed funding. But try to figure out how we can raise that to be able to get that going forward. No, and there was just. I think those are the main points.
I think to caveat the maintenance one, the reason we don't get to that quickly is because our preference is obviously to get this problem resolved. Because if we go down this track with them for maintenance, we are talking that there's exfiltration going on. We are talking about the fact that staff now needs to follow up with them on a more regular basis. Now we have to review their video with them to make sure. And so to that extent, we've really kind of limited that to really people who've demonstrated that they just have a financial hardship that is precluding them from really tackling it. Because, we just, it's not.
The only other point I wanted to make is you mentioned that we missed kind of the opportunity to get the contractor with the bidding to do the analysis. I think those two can be decoupled. I think we should go forward, obviously, I'll go on to get these bids for the inspections and the repairs, and then the analysis can be a different contractor, and that probably makes a lot of sense to even have him, so it's not the chicken and the fox.
Yeah,
but
living together.
I don't think they have to be coupled. They can easily be decoupled. So I think it's a great idea.
Ms. Sneddon.
I think I've spoken enough, except for extreme support of this. And then I do want to echo a couple of comments that if just a simple statement, maybe in the billing, like, do you know you own your lateral and your Y? This can cost you thousands of dollars. The expected life expectancy of this type of connection is this many years. And then a reference to the website for more information. So just start that, because I know when the gas company sent those out to everybody and they sent them multiple times, it was like, what? I own that? And then they offer this insurance, and it really heightened the awareness. So even just that, just not much, but just in a reference to that website, which is excellent. The website has so much information. I agree with many that there's just not even an awareness that you're responsible for that.
So I did have kind of a question, I guess, for the group. City Council. This is an item we've been batting around here. And at what point do you feel like we should bring this to the full council and share with them where we've been on it? I'm looking for feedback on this. We've certainly made a lot of progress, but there's a lot of information still to come. When's a good time to check in with them? Just curious if you guys have any strong feelings on the timing of that.
If you asked me, it'd be summer. After we see it for the next time, and then I know it's on, like, in the last section of your staff report too, but I haven't given up my enthusiasm also for a program that offers financial assistance for low-income ratepayers and whatever that looks like. And if Dave Davis was here today, he could tell you all about the roofing thing that I keep referring to 20 years ago and where it came from and how it made money, and as long as you can get the seed money. And I know you have issues with that being part of Prop 218 and water, but that just means you go hat in hand to the general fund probably, and what that conversation's like. But to me, you're still frustratingly close to having the whole portfolio about ready to talk about, and it's still missing the information you're going to have when the RFP comes back, and something other than we're continuing to work on financial assistance. It's my opinion. I don't want to have the only opinion. Okay, good. I knew I could talk you into that.
Chair Jordan, I would say when the RFP comes back and we have numbers on what that cost comparison is and what that means for the public in terms of savings, and I think that sounds like that's pretty soon. I might have thought maybe before an RFP goes out, but I don't think so. I think the best after you have those numbers to present it as this has been a problem, that you've done so much to address this problem. I mean, this is, and I will happily mention that too whenever you do bring it, that this was very responsive to what the public's needs, and any one of us and council will have gotten a letter from somebody at some point. So this provides relief actually to know that things are happening and this is how we can direct people, and so I think sooner rather than later, and especially if it's going to require staff, additional staff or arrangement of staff, I think possibly maybe even while we're in budget. I'm not sure.
We had hoped, I think, with that, but Galen does a great job picking up the ball, and I think that was part of some of the momentum we're headed towards and kind of lost. And I think there's still a time. We're reaching out to the city administrator to talk about, hey, I know this is very unusual, but I think maybe when we bring this item to council, we can talk to them. And at the end of the day, it's not typical to add or to talk about staffing mid-year or even, but maybe in this case we want to do that to fully get this program going sooner.
Yeah, and I'd be supportive of that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you both. I'm going to check with everybody with time. I've done my usual good job of managing time. So if we continue like we're going, we're going to go till noon.
So
if you don't want to do that, we could move the Montecito item to next month. And
sure, Jordan, I am fully prepared to give this presentation, but if you may recall, Commissioner Davis was the one who actually asked for this item specifically.
Okay.
And it is a presentation that we did give to Water Commission or to Council in January. So I don't think it's a time-sensitive item. I think June would probably be good, and I have...
okay with that?
At this point,
okay.
I haven't heard if anybody won't be here for the June meeting, so maybe we'll have a full cast.
So let's defer that one off a month.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to subcommittee reports. And is there anything other than me talking about last week?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we had any other...
So last week I was fortunate enough to get invited to attend the ACWA, and I still don't know what that means.
Association of California Water Agencies.
Thank you, because I just keep hearing ACWA, which so it is a clean water group rather than a wastewater group, and a couple thousand members across the state, and you are mixed in the room basically with a group of munis and counties, ag water districts, special water districts. So it's I would call that my range of anything from normal people to very conservative farmer type people in the room together. Okay, so an interesting group, and it was great to see the overall kind of dynamic of the group, to get the breakout work. But I just wanted to say what I really took away from that was just a couple things. And one you've already heard from. My comment on the last item was the need for better messaging, branding, and engagement, and that just basically government, any type of government or quasi-government organization probably does historically a very poor job at that in today's dynamic. The city of San Francisco's water district was there. They have 20 public information officers. That's all they do. Just out, yeah. Well, they're a little bigger. I get that, but I'm just saying. So one of the panels had one of those people there as part of the panel. And it was just amazing to hear what they do and how they do it, and they have the resources to do it, obviously. The other couple takeaways I had was one panel I went to on the Delta Tunnel, the single tunnel now. And one of the complaints always you hear all kinds of complaints about on the tunnels or the tunnel. But one of the takeaway comments from there was that it is not simply a fish issue or a delta preservation issue or stealing water from Northern California and getting it to Southern California. And that was the point was made in the context that at the top end of the delta, and I'll get the numbers wrong, but I'm going to be close. The top end of the delta is like 7 or 8 feet above sea level. The bottom end of the delta is 3 feet above sea level. And with sea level rise going on in 50 years, sea level is going to be higher than either one of those numbers in the delta. And so it is clearly as much about making sure that the fresh water that's entering the delta can get through the delta in some type of conveyance and then serve everybody after that point, which is, of course, a lot of Central California and agricultural stuff inland and on the coast. And so I had not heard that statistic before. I had not heard that type of strategy on that before. And then there's another piece of legislation working its way through the process that is not called a water tax, but that's how it's being framed, and that is a very small tax on water users. And so I'll just make up a number. Maybe for a residential home, it's 25 cents a month. And it will go to remedying those who do not have access to clean water in California. And the numbers there are both tough and sobering when you see that. But I want to say it's 1 in 30 people right now in the state of California don't have access to clean water. Most of that is in flat Central California regions, primarily agriculture, where cities or communities have grown up, and basically 40 years ago they were just able to put a straw down into the ground and drink the water without treatment. And then as agriculture has circled them in, obviously now their water is contaminated by runoff or seepage from pesticides and herbicides. And they're having to either truck water in or just live off bottled water. In some cases they can't even bathe or wash their dishes in the water. And we historically have had a problem on fingering agriculture for it, in some cases appropriately because maybe it's legacy contamination, but in other cases just the politics of that. So the governor is pushing for a remedy that will blend that cost amongst all the state ratepayers rather than just going into a smaller group and trying to put a larger cost on that group. And I think it's probably a remedy that should be much more conducive to most people than not. Some people are seeing it as a tax, and those people who don't like taxes are appropriately acting out on that. Then last thing, the three keynote speakers were all from recent Governor Newsom appointees in the state, and those were really the highlights of my attendance. And State Water Board new chair is Joaquin Esquivel. The state EPA chair, which is a cabinet position, I forget his name, and the state natural resources chair, who is a guy named Wade Crowfoot. All three of those were appointed by Governor Newsom in January of 2019. All three of them are very dynamic, very intelligent, down-to-earth based, what's on the ground happening or not happening in water issues. And it's pretty clear to me that Governor Newsom at least has hit the ground running with a renewed emphasis on all things water in California, whether it's conservation, water quality, water treatment, whatever it is. All three of these guys were really great speakers, really well spoken, have great backgrounds both nationally and regionally with water over their history. In the case of Joaquin Escoval, he's been on the State Water Board for 2 years and just elevated to chair. He grew up in the Coachella Valley area, so down, I think, inland from San Diego. His parents were migrant farm workers. So he brings that reference point of water user issues, those who use the water at the person level, so to speak, with him to the entire state bureaucracy, and really well spoken, really nice to talk to. He was one of the three I actually went over and said hello to, and he made me sit down and chat for a minute, which I thought was really nice. So, you have anything else? You went to more of the technical stuff. I just went to the fun stuff. But do you have anything else you want to add?
I think, in the sake of time, no. But it was really a good discussion, good networking. Got some different ideas I'll be bringing back to you guys on other items.
Okay, you have 4 minutes for the manager's report.
I'm just going to provide you. We have their static report here. I don't think there's anything I need to really highlight in there. I did want to note that we are working with UCSB and Commissioner Keller on a study with the students on trying to evaluate the impacts of rainfall and our water supply due to climate change. So that's something that I think we're kind of excited to see where that takes it, and something that we ultimately can fold into the long-term water supply plan. Final interviews for the wastewater manager position are next week. So I hope to have, got it narrowed down to 2. Yeah. And I think at some point here we want to bring back and talk about legislative items. I think as Commissioner Jordan got exposed to, the state is uber busy creating legislation, and there's a lot of work coming our way in the reporting realm. I'd like to think that we're a leader in doing a lot of this stuff, but it still takes away from the fact that they're now having to put it in their forms and do a lot of this stuff. And we're getting really detailed on water loss. They're doing aerial photos of all the communities and assessing what your water usage should be outside. And so
I guess the analogy I would use, if you've been following what's happening with Governor Brown and Governor Newsom on housing issues coming down from the state legislature, this is really also starting to occur with water issues originating in the state legislature too. That type of attention and generated legislation.
Yeah, and I think the question we'll be talking about is how we adapt, how we feed that into our. I mean, it's all good practices. At the end of the day, it's all. I don't necessarily object to the direction we're heading. It's just a lot of stuff and all coming at once. So anyway, I think we'll go through that. I mean, there's probably 10 significant legislative items moving through, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones that I think we're keeping our eye on.
Next month?
Tentatively, I got it penciled in for next month, and we'll see how busy the agenda is.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Good.